I'm being joined by a former federal lawmaker, Senator Shehu Sani. Thank you so much, distinguished, for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Let me first and foremost, the president said he was going to replace them. But it does look like a lot of people thought that since the likes of Rotimi Amechi did not get a presidential ticket, because Akpabio couldn't get a presidential ticket, and a few others who also resigned, perhaps they were going to be returned to the cabinet. Did you also think so? And what did you make of the president's decision?
Well, naturally, when you have a vacuum like this, with the resignation of the ministers and their entry into the political scene, it is incumbent on the president to nominate new set of ministers who will continue with the normal conduct of government and governance. And it has been habitual for this president to take a very long time before replacing a minister. As you can see, many of these ministers have been there for 8 years. But this time around, I think he's very conscious of the fact that time is against him, and there are projects that have been left uncompleted. For example, the railways under Rotimi Amechi. There is the need to have a head, one who will continue to steer those contracts, those agreements, so that at least the targets can be met. And in the case of Ministry of Niger Delta, both the minister and Minister of State resigned, so it was simply on autopilot. And there are issues that have to do with NNDC, NDDC, which need to be addressed. So what has been done with the names submitted to the Senate, I think, is in the right direction. And it is for the Senate to fix a date, screen them, so that they can continue with what they need to do. But I thought even that as critical as the Ministry of Transportation is, actually the former minister who has made pledges and promises of completing this rail line, some within this year, some next year, he should have been returned to ensure that all those contracts that were signed with China and Portugal and other financiers of our railway projects, at least he sees them to the end. Because it has been the culture in this country. Each time you have a new minister, projects are usually stalled when ideally there should be continuity in governance and activities of government. So what has been done is in order, but what is important is that they should be cleared by the Senate to return to work, because they have less than 8 to 9 months to fold up, but not putting anybody there can turn into a serious problem for the country.
For those who were pessimistic, who thought that the president would not, probably leave it and maybe just move people around in the cabinet, were you one of those who thought the president may not, and those who have thought that the president is not the one who is quick to make this kind of appointments, he takes his time?
Yeah, I was surprised to read that names were sent to the National Assembly, having that he has a record, a non-record, is notoriously for delaying appointments and being indecisive on issues. If you can recall history, before he appointed the ministers when he took over office in 2015, it took him many months. Is it 4 to 5 months? I don't know. And then there was a minister from Kogi State that died in a road crash. It also took eternity for him to appoint a new one. And then you have cases of replacement of Minister of Agriculture and that of Power. It also takes time for him to reshuffle. So this is the first time, even in the history of this country, where you have ministers staying in the same positions for 8 years without being reshuffled, and those who are sacked without being replaced. But I think he has lately or belatedly recognized that he has very little time left, and then he took this action. So it is, in fact, contrary to what we have expected. I expected him to at least stay up to December before he did what he did, but at least he has done it now.
So some people will say it was needed for stability to keep people and for them to be able to do whatever they've started in their different ministries. Perhaps what has become, what has characterized the president's style in terms of appointment into federal cabinet compared to other presidents in the past who are used to moving ministers around and replacing them and all of that, that the Buhari style is what brings some level of stability and balance in the cabinet rather than moving people around and filled with uncertainty. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think President Buhari's style is boring and suffocating, and it is sort of disenchanting. In most countries of the world, the basis for reshuffling cabinets is to avail the ministers another opportunity to show their talents, expertise, and experience in other fields. And also, each time you reshuffle cabinet or you replace ministers, you give other persons the opportunity for them to serve the country. After all, this is a person who has been working hard and struggling to be president of Nigeria for almost over a decade. So my expectation of him was that even for the sake of injecting new ideas, new blood into the system and refreshing his government, there could have been this policy that was done during Obasanjo's administration, where ministers after a year, 2 years, they can be reshuffled. Or sometimes you even bring people with fresh ideas, with bright ideas. But it has been systemic in its own way. Sometimes even you see head of paramilitary agencies, the immigrations, the prisons, the customs, and all those things, and civil defense, are finishing their tenure, and police, IG, and extending them further, and service chiefs. So you see, his style has not been able to give many Nigerians the opportunity to serve their country. He started with this team and he is finishing with them. And I believe that as an experienced statesman like him, who has been in the political terrain for a very long time, it is expected of him to have known so many people who have fresh ideas and who can do a lot. There is nothing wrong if you reshuffle. Let's say you remove a minister from this agency and the ministry, and then you reshuffle him to another.
I mean, but did you have problems because you sat on you were one of those who sat on the confirmation of some of the ministers that President Buhari, when you were in the Senate, did you have problems in the quality of the persons that President Buhari had put forward? I'd like us to also analyze some of these persons that President has sent to the Senate. I mean, there are people who will praise the capacity and the manner and the caliber of people that Obasanjo brought into cabinet, the Okonjo-Iweala of this world, the Obi Ezekwesili, a few other hands that came in to work with the Obasanjo administration. Would you say that the Buhari administration, if you look at the caliber of people that have been nominated, are you impressed by their profile?
Well, it is not about their person, first of all. It's about the institution of government. You can be an engineer that is in one ministry, but you can also be shuffled to another ministry to do what you need to do. I think the handicap of the National Assembly has been the fact that each time ministerial nominees are sent to the National Assembly, the president doesn't attach, we don't know what ministries they are going to be sent to.
And it's similar to the questions. The letter is also similar to all of the times the president has sent the name.
So the questions are always random. You don't even know what to ask any person. You can have a barrister who is nominated, and then you don't know whether it's going to be taken to Ministry of Justice or Agriculture. So you simply ask general questions. So I think in the future, what is important is that a president who is sending nominees to the National Assembly must let the National Assembly know where he is taking them to, so that the questions can be professional can be direct, can be relevant to
and
where
the
you are
grilling
going
will
to.
be proper, isn't it?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's bring in a former minister here who also worked in the President Buhari's cabinet, a former minister of sport, Mr. Solomon Dalong, who joins us now virtually. Thank you so much, Mr. Dalong, for your time tonight. Give us a sense of your feeling. I mean, you've worked with President Buhari, and what you've seen today, the caliber of people that have been nominated as ministers to replace the like of Ogboyent Naya Onu, the likes of Rotimi Amechi and Goswill Akpabio. What are your thoughts on these personalities?
Well, I congratulate the president for the first time in acting promptly and responding to filling of vacancies on time. Because, like Senator Sani did mention, in the first term where I served, it was after 6 months before we were appointed. And even after our appointment, it took a very long time before we were inaugurated. And when we lost a colleague and another member of the cabinet resigned, it took nearly over a year before the replacement was made. So for the president to have sent in the names of these nominees this time, I think he had responded to the fact that the country needs their services at this critical time, and that governance cannot be allowed to slow down because of a vacuum. But as to the credentials of the people nominated, I think the president picked more of people from the South and possibly the Southeast. And I'm tempted to look at it as trying to pacify that zone that have been crying foul of marginalization, and especially looking at elections ahead and the crisis that now has characterized the electoral process of production of candidates and the mass defections is party. So, of course,
okay, I mean, I imagine that, Mr. Dalong,
try to stabilize.
I imagine that some of these replacements are directly from the states where we saw some of the resignation. For example, and Ademola Adegoroye from Ondo State will probably be replacing Tayo Alasha Adura, who also resigned, and Udom Udi from River State will naturally will be replacing Rotimi Amechi, and also the likes of Umana, a former governorship candidate in Akwa Ibom State, naturally will be replacing Goswill Akpabio. So in this sense, what does it feel like working in a Buhari cabinet, given your experience? Is it a cabinet you work that you have a free hand to work? Or, I mean, how would you describe or how would you predict their next 8 months or 7 months that they're about in office would look like, comparing or looking at working in a Buhari cabinet, typically?
Well, Buhari, as a person and his cabinet, it gives you a free hand to operate. And but it is not the same thing that I enjoy the same support with the government, because within the government, people whom you deal with, facilitating those within the veranda of the president that
the audio quality there is very terrible. We'll try to see if it gets better. We'll come back to you, Mr. Dalong, the former Minister for Sport under the Buhari government in the first term. But, I mean, the same question that I asked Mr. Dalong is working under the Buhari government. do you see, because now it is obvious that there's no more time, do you imagine that there will be some speed, some energy that will be infused into the work mode in the cabinet now that they have just about 7 or 8 months to go?
Well, I have not worked in his cabinet, so I will not be able to know how they work there. But from what we can see from a distance, it is left for the individual ministers who are taking charge to hit the ground running, to go through the files of their predecessors and see what they can do within the very short period of time. But the government has been one that has always been very slow. And if you depend perhaps on trying to see the president and do what you need to do until you get directives to do it, and then you will waste your 7 to 8 months without doing anything. A simple thing that needs to be done under this administration takes eternity for it to be executed. So most of these ministers who are just coming into office now, I believe it is an opportunity of their lifetime to do what they can within a very short time. And like I'm emphasizing on the railways, there were promises that Lagos-Ibadan will 100% be done, Kaduna to Kano, and then Kano to Maradi. So I believe contract has been signed, and whoever is going to be the Minister of Transportation has to come with this foreknowledge that until he hits the ground running, many things will be left undone. So it is for them to write their name in gold within a very short time, to sprint like 100 meters and to achieve what they want to achieve, because there is no time. And for the president, he knows that in less than a year, his chapter and his era is over in the history of Nigeria. So he has to prepare himself for post-presidential life. Either he comes to live with us in Kaduna, or he goes to Daura to go and stay. But we are expecting him to come back to Kaduna to us. And then all that you have done, you will be able to see it clearly by the time you're out of power. Whether you have performed, all the people you have made, those you have, or made those you have injured, those you have helped, and those you don't. When you finish and you go back to your home, you'll be able to see. For now, he's still in charge, and then he still have some very few minutes, and which is the injury time for him to do what he needs to do.
You imagine that the present Senate, as is constituted, a lot of them very angry because they will not come back. A lot of them still, I mean, in their shape and color, the way they've been. You imagine that these guys might have, these nominees might have an easy ride, do you think?
Yeah,
in terms of the confirmation
naturally,
process.
At the twilight of every tenure, you are bound to have this kind of changes. People decamping from one party to another, some gaining position, some losing it, some are angry and some are happy. This convulsion has been with us for almost two decades now. So there is virtually nothing they can do. All they can is simply to screen them, to pass them. And this is not like our own kind of Senate when we have to grill you to the last point. They are experts in approving everything. So they can just tell them to go after whatever. So, but for now, I think what is good is that they should do it as they have been used to, because there is virtually no time to waste. And for him, he has come to realization that with all the promises and pledges you make as a candidate prior to 2015, you will find out that you can't solve the problem of Nigeria as a magician. You simply have to do what you can and then leave others to continue. But what is most important, he should use the remaining period of time to secure the nation from terrorists and bandits and try to do what he can to stabilize the country and conduct free, fair, and credible elections. If he is able to conduct an election without interference, as we have seen they have done in their APC, trying to nominate this person as they shouldn't interfere, allow transparency, and then hand over to whoever wins. I think that will be his last legacy as far as his era is concerned.
On a final note, a lot of people had said, look, INEC's schedule of activities that allows for almost 8 months of campaign, that it will be injurious to governance because attention will be on the campaigns and preparing for elections. Do you expect the worst situation, scenario playing out, considering the fact that within those 8 months are the issue of security, the issue of epileptic nature of power, and the issue of ASU strike, a lot of students who are still at home, there's a fuel scarcity.
Yeah, I think the problem is rooted in the Electoral Act, where about 180 days was given. Most of the people that now hold the ticket of their political parties, either as governors, as senators, as members of House of Reps or State House of Assembly, have a very long time to campaign. Many of them will end up in trouble with many of their electorates, even for the fact that people will gather outside your house trying to see you for 8 months, trying to pressurize you to address their issues, is also a major problem. But in the general sense, I think it's also incumbent on the presidential candidates of these political parties to know very well that before they become president, before they are able to realize their dreams, their ambitions, and whatever they have been struggling to become, there must be a country. We must avoid whipping up ethnic, religious, and sectional sentiment, because election is not just a democratic exercise, it's a national security issue. If we play it wrongly, it may bring an end to this country. So we should make sure that whatever we do, we reflect the realities of our country, and also we balance on our own tripods and fault lines that have been an issue for us over a period of time. So presidential candidates will naturally campaign in a very unusual atmosphere. For example, in most of the states in the northwestern part of Nigeria that have been under terrorists and bandits, are infested by terrorists and bandits, it will be difficult for many to go to such areas and campaign. But they must find a way they can reach out to the people. So at least the president needs to sit down with all the presidential candidates in the interest of the survival, the unity, and the existence of Nigeria. There is a need for them to campaign with decorum, with respect, and with responsibility. Yes.
Senator Shehu, Sani, I must indeed thank you so much for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Senator Shehu, Sani, a former federal lawmaker. And we had earlier a former Minister of Sport, Mr. Solomon Dalong. Unfortunately, the network connection couldn't allow us to continue with the interview with him. Thank you so much.